Assalamu alaikum. My name is Fadwa Wazwaz. I'm doing a presentation today. It's going to be on what's your message? How did you come to know your message? And how did you verify? What methodology have you used to arrive at conviction? What methodology did you use? I want to begin by explaining something that's very important. When I began this project, a lot of times I have studied arguments of other individuals. And I was not comfortable with the fact that some individuals, even in our own community, were kind of promoting Islam in a way that Zionists were promoting their own message. And the definition of success, the definition of failure seemed to kind of mirror the way Zionists view success, failure, hope. And I found that very problematic. This particular theme aims really to address Muslims first and foremost, but also the greater community who wants to, if you will, debate Islam or Muslims. It's not a tit for tat. I need to put you down to irrigate myself and feel good. It has to be about what message do you carry? Put it on the table. Is it open for scrutiny? Is it open for investigation? Do you want to criticize Islam? Are you open to being criticized? Or do you feel, fragile, like no one can criticize, but you want to criticize? To continue with what I'm trying to get at is the issue of image and reality. In science, there's something called a shadow, and a shadow is simple. It's the absence of light caused by an obstruction. But in society, a shadow is far more dangerous. It's a deliberate blocking of truth. When truth is obscured, it doesn't disappear. You can't kill the truth, for example. Truth does not expire. Falsehood expires. It has an expiration date. But you can't kill the truth, or it does not have an expiration date. What you can do is block it. So there's a shadow. So it casts a silhouette. And that silhouette tells us everything about what someone doesn't want us to see. We live in a time when truth is not just hidden, it is also haunted, for example. Or negotiators are assassinated, or doctors are detained, civilians are bombed from afar. And those who dare to speak are either criminalized or silenced. This is not the absence of truth, it's the shadow of power. The Quran teaches us, produce your proof if you are truthful. So truth demands evidence, demands accountability. When someone claims ancient heritage, for example, like this is their claim, they put it on the table. We were here 3,500 years ago. So therefore we have divine right. Or moral superiority. Well, why did it take you 3,500 years? Were you a failure all these time for 3,500 years? And now you're successful? So what does it say about your message? They must not only show us their lineage, but they have to live by the teachings they invoke. So if you were there 3,500 years, do you live according to the teachings of 3,500 years ago? You can't claim a 3,500-year-old tradition and ignore its moral code. You can't demand others submit to your history or your claims without providing any evidence, DNA tests, something that can point scientifically to you being there 3,500 years, and that you don't just carry that message like, a book, like a donkey on their back, but you carry that book, you carry that message, meaning that you live by that message. You're like, this is our message. You can't call yourself a soldier if your only battlefield is a refugee camp. You're just throwing bombs on refugees. You can't demand others submit to your history or your claims while you yourself violate its ethics. If you're not following this 3,500-year teaching, how can you then ask others to submit to a claim that either you have produced no scientific evidence and you yourself don't even abide by the teachings or the ethics of those teachings? So when truth is blocked, what are we left with? We're left with a shadow. And in that shadow, we see the outline of injustice, the shape of hypocrisy, and the weight of silence or playing with doubt. But shadows only exist when light is present. So it's an we can look at it two ways. Somebody is blocking the truth, but also in a good way that there is light. Why else would they need to block it if that is not light? So it's also an invitation for us to carry that message, that light that is being blocked, so that it can shine every hidden blocked truth, every silenced voice, every detained healer, every bombed classroom. Because truth, once revealed, casts no shadow. Another understanding of Islam is archetypes over identities. Islamic teachings, and this is the beauty of Islamic teachings, is we don't have images of prophets. You may look into the books and understand like certain, portraits, what they looked like, but ultimately what you see is we don't have the physical characteristics front and center about the prophets. What we have are their arguments, their teachings, their saying, their actions. That's like front and center on the table. Similarly, like for saints, we don't walk around with images of saints or sages, if you will, like Ibn Ata'illah. What we do walk around with is their sayings, their words, their actions. That becomes front and center. So there's archetypes and there is identities. So the Islamic message is about archetype and to help us to identify that archetype. And we do it by recognizing the words, the arguments that comes out of the individual that is speaking. So we don't have icons. As you could see, we don't have statues. In fact, we welcome when statues are destroyed, like statues of Saddam Hussein or statues of Assad. We don't like statues. This absence is intentional. Islam teaches that the struggle between truth and falsehood is not about identity. It's not, like there are prophets that are Jewish, ethnically Jewish. And there are prophets that are Arabs. And there are prophets of other, identities. It's about the message. It's not about identity. It's not about black skin versus white skin, this identity versus that identity. It's about the message, about the character, the conviction in your message. Like I said, if you're going to claim 3,500 years ago, but you're not even following that message. I mean, one does not need to look far to recognize it. You don't even follow even 1% of the message. Alignment and the divine guidance. We're all children of Adam, upon and peace. And our worth is not in how we look or how many followers we have, but in how we speak and how we act. So when we exit this world, your companion will be your words and actions. That's who you'll take with you in your grave. Now, if you blocked yourself from seeing the truth, from reflecting on the truth, from investigating the truth, verifying the truth, then you will be with your shadow in your grave. Your companion will be your shadow. You will have thought when you were on earth that you were, fighting all of these, falsehoods, when all along you were just projecting your reality onto others and you were just engaged in shadowboxing. You never really came to the truth. You never internalized the light. Because remember, the shadow disappears when you carry light. So if you never internalize that light, when you go into your grave, you'll be in your grave with your shadow. That's who you'll be in your grave that's who the companion is in your grave. It'll be your shadow. You never allowed the light to come in and for you to become a vessel of that light. I'll explain more in future videos, but just patiently, I don't want to overwhelm you. Just walk with me here a bit. The Quran presents archetypes, recurring patterns of behavior embodied by figures like Pharaoh, Abu Jahl, example, Satan, Qarun. These are archetypes. There's the prophets, and then there are, again, those who are on the other side of who don't carry light. These are not just historical villains. They are moral templates. They are archetypes. When someone speaks today, we listen not just to their words, but to the archetype they echo. So if you're saying, we are great, we are successful, look at all we've done. Okay, well, why 3,500 years? What were you then? Failures? If it took 3,500 years for you to be successful, and to become great, what does it say about the message you carry? So one can kind of go back and forth with the argument they put on the table. But again, a better way is to say, if we look to the Quran, who makes such an argument? The Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt who claimed divine status and used his power to oppress the Israelites. He is the archetype of tyranny, arrogance, and denial of divine authority. Abu Jahl is another person who made such an argument. He's a powerful leader in Mecca who mocked Prophet Muhammad upon him peace and blessings and threatened violence against him. So he represents pride, hostility toward truth, reliance on worldly support. So when people boast of power, so listen to your message, and they openly say that they will crush the weak, or the weak will crumble, or they mock divine accountability, like telling God, even like, our sins are little, but your sins are great. Again, projection. They're projecting their shadows onto God or their shadows onto others. And they're engaged in shadow boxing, but they never really internalize the light. So it never goes in. They may see themselves as successful, but their words tell another story. They sound not like the prophets, but like Pharaoh or Abu Jahl. So this is how we process these voices. There is power in the illusion of power. So consider the Quranic passage from Surah Al-Alaq. This is chapter 96, verse 13 to verse 19, revealed in response to Abu Jahl's threats. Seest thou if he denies the truth and turns away? Again, there's someone blocking the truth. This is where you get into shadow boxing. He's blocking the truth. Who's he? Abu Jahl. But he's an archetype of others who do the same thing in society. Know he not that Allah does see? Let him beware. If he desists not, we will drag him by the forelock. Forelock is right here. This is the executive branch. Like if you'd study cognitive psychology, this is the executive branch of the brain. This is where deliberation, like if trying to plot and plan something, it's done right here. This is where you can make a decision to filter something out or to cut and paste. It's done right here. Where you want to block the truth, it's done right here. A lying, sinful forelock. Then let him call for help to his council of comrades. We will call on the angels of punishment to deal with him. Nay, heed him not, but bow down adoration and bring thyself the closer to Allah. So the audience here is every just person being asked. Have you seen the one who prevents a servant from worshiping God, or someone who's blocking the truth? What if that servant is rightly guided? What if that person who's bringing the truth is a good person, warning others to fear God and refrain from evil? And the one forbidding him, the one that's blocking the truth, is denying and turning away. What then? That's the question. Could this man adopt such an attitude if he truly knew that Allah is watching both, the one who exhorts piety and the one who denies it? Allah's watchfulness implies justice. He sees the oppressor and the oppressed, and he will redress the grievances of the wronged. The forelock here again represents, the decisions. It represents the internal and external reality. The internal, because we cannot really see what's in part of the internal reality of people, but it tells us that God does see it. So if you are trying to block the truth, you may clothe it, with either religion, or you may clothe it with lawfare, or you may clothe it with democracy, whatever it is, but God sees your intentions. And he knows your aim is you want to block the truth. You want to win an argument, and your ability to win is not by engaging with the truth, but by blocking it. So he will drag that forelock. That's divine justice, despite their arrogance. So Abu Jahl once retorted to Prophet Muhammad, upon him peace and blessings, "O Muhammad, on what strength do you threaten me? By God, my supporters in this valley far exceed yours in number." This is very important to reflect on how Abu Jahl is arguing, because sometimes we don't see ourselves. And I'm saying here, even like Muslims, they sometimes will argue this way, and they have to realize that's the argument that Zionists are making. That's the argument that Netanyahu made, that the weak will crumble, and the strong will win, So again, it's that Abu Jahl argument, that Pharaoh argument. On what strength do you threaten me? The Quran responds, let him call his band of supporters. We too shall summon our police, the angels of torment, to deal with him and his allies. Because eventually we're all going to exit this world. And he's being tested to do what is right. Instead, he's using that to arrogate himself over others, over the weak. So the Prophet was told to prostrate, implies here prayer. Such individuals, huff and puff in arrogance to respond in prayer. It is a divine command. O Prophet, continue to pray fearlessly and seek your Lord's presence through it. As Abu Hurairah narrated, the servant is nearest to his Lord when he is in a state of prostration. So this is the nearest position to God. So that is the sanctuary when when you're feeling overpowered, when you're feeling the arrogance, of the arrogant directed at you, that to turn to God. And that prostration is about coming closer and closer to the divine. Today we see similar rhetoric in politics and media. I'm going to give you some examples. Leaders walk into global forums, boast of their military might. They use platforms to justify violence. When Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu used his UN speech to signal military strikes, it echoed Abu Jahl's boast. He walked into the UN, kind of in a way saying, look at my power, look at my supporters. And he said it in words, we control the United States. This pattern is not limited to one side. Political factions that claim to speak truth to power, such as some voices in the Democratic Party, they often respond to criticism not with humility, but also like them, they respond with boastful tone. It's either mockery or our supporters outnumber yours. This is literally how the DNC, convention was. Look at all the people in the audience. They never really engaged with the argument of the Republicans. If you were watching, it was just kind of this spectacle. Woo! Look at how, all about joy and the placebo joy, and they relied on applause and institutional backing. What was missing was any moral clarity. In fact, the 40 beheaded babies and mass rapes, lies that were spread by Zionists. Kamala Harris went on stage and just repeated them over and over again, hoping again to instigate, institutional backing and applause, not really seeking moral clarity. So it's all about spectacle. There was really no message that she put on the table. It was just spectacle. Joy, laugh, look at how many people are in the crowd. I don't know if you saw that argument, but literally it's the argument of Abu Jahl, pride, arrogance. So we must ask, are they truly speaking truth to power? This is how they presented themselves, or simply wielding power under a different banner. Islam's message and methodology. Islam's message is very clear. Truth is not measured by popularity. So the popularity argument the DNC brought, look at us, joy, laughter, applause, but by alignment with divine guidance. Prophet, upon him peace and blessing, didn't win arguments by gathering crowds or crushing opponents. Look at how many people, he spoke with clarity, patience, and unwavering commitment to justice, even when he stood alone. So our methodology is rooted in the Quran and the example of the prophets, the words, the arguments, the actions. We do not respond to arrogance by presenting it as success, as many popular, if you will, movements do, like Zionists. They look at how much success we have. Okay, well, 3,500 years ago, you said, based on your words, that you were persecuted. So it took you 3,500 years to arrive at success. Why were you then persecuted all these 3,500 years and you weren't successful throughout? I'm not trying to be like, tit for tat, but pushing their argument back at them. Have you really considered your argument? Have you really reflected on how you come across? Doesn't it sound like those who mocked you when they persecuted you in earlier days? Didn't Pharaoh say the same thing about the Israelites, for example? We respond again with prayer, like the Quran teaches us, reflection. Again, internalizing the message. How do you remove the blockage, the one that's blocking the truth? You internalize the message, and you invite others to internalize the message, because the more light people carry, and this person carries, and this person carries, and this person carries, truth has no expiration date. Falsehood has an expiration date. Then the shadow is no more. So as the Quran says, bow down in adoration and bring thyself closer to Allah. So when someone huffs and puffs in arrogance, and he's saying, look at my followers, you turn closer and closer to God. Because God will bring people without you plotting and planning, finding influencers and paying them 7,000 here. He'll bring people that you don't know, that you don't perceive. And they are listening, but you're not probably aware that they are watching and they are listening. And they are reflecting on both messages. Just like during Ta'if, Abbas comes to speak with Prophet Muhammad, upon him peace and blessings. There was no kid. He didn't pay him money to come and do that. If you go closer and closer to God, when arrogance huffs and puffs, God brings people that are willing and are open to reflecting on that message and then internalizing the message. So the more people carry the light, and the more people carry the light, then more the shadow will disappear. Rejecting Islam is a personal choice. But misrepresenting Islam, especially by claiming moral high ground while echoing the rhetoric of tyrants, the actions of tyrants, is not acceptable. If your message is sincere, then clarify it. Open, to engage with your message. If your values are just, then you should be able to accept them against you. If you're going to say that dropping bombs, on civilians in, for example, Gaza is okay, then you should accept, what happened when people were being persecuted, or they persecuted Jews, making those same arguments. Jews built tunnels. Jews had resistance groups when they were persecuted. So then you should not be presenting them as martyrs or as heroes. You should recognize them as terrorists. So again, if your values are just, you accept them against you. Otherwise, you can't be making, one argument saying these are resistance fighters when you're fighting the Nazis, but these are terrorists when you're the nuclear superpower and you clearly stole their land and you're trying to ethnically cleanse them, and you're saying these are terrorists. You can't be making, for the same set of facts, two different arguments. If they are just, you accept them against. Truth is a double-edged sword. You accept it against others and you accept it against yourself. It's a double-edged sword. You can't be saying these are terrorists, but we were resistance fighters during Nazi Germany. Doesn't make sense. That's not an argument. That's, again, shadow boxing. Don't take shots at others. Take responsibility for your words and for your actions. Standing with the silenced. The message matters now more than ever. In Gaza, Palestinians are being criminalized, silenced, but also misrepresented, not just by bombs, but by the global refusal to hear their truth. They're not given platforms to clarify their message. Their pain is politicized, their resistance misrepresented, and their humanity is ignored. Islam teaches us to stand with the truth, not just in sentiment, but in clarity, to clarify the message in truth, not to overwrite it so that it becomes popular, so people like it and pay influencers, say, hey, I'll pay you 7,000, can you, say this, and this one, can you make it more prettier, and this, what is your message? What is the methodology? How do we respond? Not with slogans, not with foolish influencers, but with sincerity, with moral clarity. We're not seeking popularity. We're seeking, again, how do you remove the blockage? Remember, if truth is light, how do you remove what's blocking the truth? You internalize it. You can have many influencers saying, something, but they never internalize it. That's not going to remove the shadow. That's not going to remove the shadow. And the way you get people to internalize it is they have to be convinced of it. And if they study it sincerely, if truth has no expiration date, if they study it sincerely, they will slowly start to accept it. And this one will accept it, and that one will accept it. And it will remove the shadows. I end with a few questions for you. This is part of, again, a theme about what's your message? How did you come to know your message? Is it to conform? Was it the popular narrative and you wanted to conform? What was your methodology? What is your method? What methodology did you do to ensure that this is the truth? How did you engage with that message? Did you just accept it and carry it, kind of, again, like those influencers being told just to conform or to be popular or to make money? What methodology did you engage in to recognize this is the truth and to internalize it so that you're not shadow boxing? So when someone says, I reject your message, you could say, it's not for you, but it's for me. It's kind of like, you don't make the argument, let me find me, 10,000 followers so I can beat them and say, I got 10,000 followers. No. More importantly, who do you sound like when you speak? Who do you support? Who do those you support sound like? Do they sound like David always praising God? Do they sound like, Prophet Muhammad, standing up in prayer, in the middle of the night? fighting, Abu Jahl in a way of moral clarity. Who do you sound like? Who do those who you support, that you give your like allegiance to, who do they sound like? It's very important for you to reflect on. Do they sound like the prophets, or do they sound like Qarun, Abu Jahl, Pharaoh, Satan? Satan's argument is he tells you to disobey God, and then when you disobey, he disassociates from you. He says, "I was not, you know, I kind of, I'm not part of this, what you have done." So he provokes, and then he removes himself. He provokes, and then he removes himself. So his aim again is to get you to turn against God. Are you someone like that? Do you play with doubt? Or do you say, I don't know, but I need to know because I'm going to exit this world, and I really better make sure that I am convinced of whatever message I carry. Doesn't make sense to exit this world and not even be convinced of the message I carry, because how someone speaks about a message that they are convinced of is different from somebody who carries a message just to conform, or carries a message just because popular influencers told them this is the message, and they're fun and they're cute and they're hilarious. That's the question you need to reflect on. Do you sound like Moses or Pharaoh, like the prophet or Abu Jahl? So do you measure success by crushing the weak and counting your backers, or by standing for truth even when it's unpopular? This isn't just a question, again, for Muslims, it's a question for everyone, because in the end, we're all we're raising arguments, we're having arguments and kind of like mirroring archetypes in the Quran. And the truth is not an image, it's not an identity, it's light. It's in the message. So either you carry it or you're shadowboxing it. And you get to decide that by reflecting on how you engage others. And if when you exit this world, you can embrace that message alone, because you will exit and be in your grave alone. So thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.